Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you, and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to today's The Hindu newspaper analysis, where we take a look at the daily edition of today's The Hindu newspaper, one article from the international edition as well, and also a couple of PIB articles. Dive into the depth and the details of these articles and extract what is relevant for your examination. Now, the purpose of these sessions is to help you understand what to extract out of any particular article and how to approach these articles. As candidates, when we read the newspaper, we are not very sure that what is relevant for the examination, and we read it like a story. So that is where we will declutter this article and then take a look at the point wise description so that it is easy for you to revise as well. Wherever possible, we will have a kind of a graphical representation for easy recollection. You can download the PDF later on as well. Now, along with that, we will also go for the practice question so that you get an idea about how to write the answers. That is very, very important if you want to have a fighting chance to clear this examination. So, what are the articles that we are going to consider today? So, today in total, we are going to consider roughly around 11 different topics. Now, Donald Trump in the Persian Labyrinth is the editorial section. It talks about the ongoing US Iran war and is a series of the articles, continuation of the series of articles talking about the US failure in terms of the policy when it comes to the Iran crisis. And along with this, we shall be considering another particular article. Proposed deal will give Tehran control over the inbound trade. Now, there is an ongoing discussion and negotiation between Oman and Iran regarding the access to the Straits of Hormuz. Now, this Strait of Hormuz will have an inbound traffic, the outbound traffic. What is that? Let us understand that. And what is it that Iran is proposing? And what is it that Oman is negotiating? And how that can be problematic? Both of these are relevant for your GS paper too. Handloom weaving India's heritage into global growth. Now, on the eve of the Handloom Day, this is an article talking about the role of Indian handloom sector in order to promote a kind of a growth story and how that can eventually fulfill global demand for handloom as well. But to be very honest to you, this particular article lacks substantial amount of crux or material in terms of requirement for the examination. So what I have done in this case is I have taken the data and the information from the PIB backgrounder, which is a detailed report that PIB generates every few days. Now, from that PIB backgrounder, we will have a much greater insight into this handloom sector and the initiatives that the government has taken to bolster this handloom sector. This is going to be relevant for your GS paper 3. Okay. Access Paradox is an article in the editorial page associated with the medical colleges, the rise in the number of private college seats, the challenges that it poses, and what can be the way forward. Again, with the help of certain data pointers outside the Hindu, we will be taking a look at this as well. This is also relevant for your GS paper 3. The Beijing model of innovation is a very apt article in the text and the context page of the newspaper today. And this Beijing model of innovation, what actually is working for in China? How is it that China is able to bridge what is referred to as the valley of death when it comes to innovation? How it has kick-started a kind of a virtuous cycle of investment, innovation, and being at the forefront of AI and cutting edge technology. We will take a look into that. Also, some of the drawbacks of this Beijing model or the China model. What can we learn out of it? So, this is relevant for your GS paper 3. Why are households pledging gold instead of selling it? A change in the consumer behavior in our country when it comes to gold. Rather than jewelry, it is being considered as a source of investment. And not only that, The mortgage of gold is on a rise, and that is where RBI is looking into it much more carefully just to ensure that all the household savings are not eroded. Relevant again for your GS paper 3. Government okays rupees 23,371 crore GOBARdhan scheme package. Now, what is that GOBARdhan scheme? It is a kind of an alternative fuel technology or a scheme which talks about utilizing of biogas. Now, what is this money going to be used into? What is the detailed scheme with the help of the schematics? Coal India forays into iron ore mining. Coal India, which is responsible for almost 80% of the coal mining across the country, has ventured into iron ore mining as well. In the region of Odisha, it has been granted an iron ore mine. Why that is important? It is relevant in terms of the long term mission and the long term goal of gaining a kind of a self sufficiency in terms of critical minerals. 10th BRICS Industry Ministers meeting in Jaipur. Agni IV missile test was conducted by the Strategic Forces Command. What is this Agni IV missile? And more importantly, for your prelims, what is the Strategic Forces Command? When was it created? What does it control? And why that is one of the foremost war fighting machinery that India will rely upon or India has to rely upon in the time of need. Now, there is a discussion about the MAHA water mission. What is this MAHA water mission? So, these are going to be the points of discussion for today, and we will go into as much detail as is required in each of these, starting with the first article. Donald Trump in the Persian labyrinth. Now, what is labyrinth? Labyrinth, in simplest of the terms, extreme simplified terms, refers to as a kind of a maze where one gets lost. That is labyrinth. Okay. Generally associated, it is an old world English term which would be used to describe the various different types of mazes which would be present in the older buildings, castle like structures, etc., where people could get easily lost, generally found in the basement. But having said that, the larger context of the article is what? Let us understand that first of all, and then we will go into the intricacies and point wise detailing of it. What is the larger sense that the article wants to indicate to you? The article tells you that look, US, when it embarked upon the war in Iran, at that point of time, along with Israel, it had set up few objectives for itself. What were the objectives that US had set for itself? And it was at that point of time when Mr. Trump, in a way, indirectly addressed the Iranians that very soon we will basically overthrow the government and then the public can take over. That was his expectation. But many months down the line, I hope he stands to be a bit wiser. Now US has got limited amount of options available to it. Every other day you hear Mr. Trump providing these kind of rants on the media channels, in the news conferences, about how he is going to wipe off Iran from the face of planet earth, how he is going to ensure there is a complete surrender of Iran, complete defeat of Iran, and so on. But still, the Iranian state is undiminished as compared to before, but the US influence has been declining. Now, when US and Israel started the war, at that point of time, US basically, and both US and Israel, they had the objective to decapitate Iran's nuclear arsenal, remove the nuclear weapons and enriched uranium that Iran has, completely remove the missile forces that Iran has developed. Thereafter, ensure that there is a regime change, and also the proxies that Iran operates in the region, from Hamas to Hezbollah, all of them, they are also dismantled. These were the four objectives that these US and Israel had set. Now, over a few months, now regime is still there. Iran has built a large number of underground city-like network where it still has the presence of missiles. Over a period of time, the Iranian public has started reposing faith in the regime. So the missile is still there, the proxies are still operating, the enriched uranium is still out of reach of US and Israel. So one is forced to ask that what is the objective and what is the end game of this entire adventurism shown by US? Late last night, there was a news which broke out, which was again, if you consider Mr. Trump, now this is one of the less entertaining news that is generated. But Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, apparently he was blasted by Mr. Trump because US has run out of almost the entirety of the stockpile of the long range precision missiles that it had. So US is running short of its ammunitions. But then if that is the condition of US, why did US venture into this kind of an action? Now, the article suggests that there can be two possible causes of action or two possible events which could have initiated the US action. First, what US did in Venezuela. Now, when you consider the US action in Venezuela, it was precise. US went in and basically captured Nicolas Maduro, immediately exfiltrated him, and the vice president took over, and she basically was very cooperative with the US regime, agreed to sell the oil to US. So US thought we can do this, we have the military prowess to do this without much of a collateral damage or without any damage at all. Secondly, this year in the month of January, there were large scale violent protests emerging on the streets of Iran. Now, as a consequence, both Israel and US thought that the larger public opinion is against the regime. All that we need to do is remove the Ayatollah, and the larger public will take over. Again, both of these were a mistake. Why? Because Iran is not a Venezuela, Iran is not an Iraq, Iran is not an Afghanistan. Iran has been and had been preparing for this war for years, if not decades. Now, what has Iran actually done? Iran has expanded the war horizontally. It had set up a decentralized military control, where, despite the fact that in the first few hours of the action, the military action by US and Israel, the Iranian Navy was almost wiped out. The Iranian Air Force was wiped out. So US and Israel thought, now this is done. But what they didn't count for is Iran's ability to manufacture these drones, the Shahid drones. Now, what Iran has done, Iran has also weaponized the region of Strait of Hormuz. Iran basically has ensured that, and has made public statements regarding that as well, that if we are not able to sell oil, we are not able to allow oil to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, none of the Gulf nations will be allowed to do the same. It has ensured a kind of a blockade. And surprisingly, US had not pictured this and not had not war gamed this in its entire strategy. Other than that, when you consider the Iranian actions, again, where a broad miscalculation comes into the picture, is the fact that US did not expect Iran to be attacking the Gulf states. And what Iran has done, wherever US military bases are present, be it the region of Kuwait, be it the region of Qatar, be it the region of Saudi Arabia, be it the region of UAE, all those countries have faced the brunt of Iranian attacks. Now, all these countries have got a substantial amount of armed forces, but as famously quoted by Mr. Shekhar Gupta of The Print, that these armed forces are more of a toy show rather than a kind of a military prowess. Why? Because all these countries, due to the huge amount of petrodollars that they have earned, they have bought the best of the machineries out there. From the Rafales to the F 16s to the Patriot missile systems, they have it all. But when it comes to the war fighting ability and the appetite to carry out this war fighting, other than UAE, few other countries have shown the appetite that they can actually stand up to Iran. As a consequence of that, what has happened? All these countries are slowly and steadily turning out to be in the favor of striking a deal with Iran, which is not something that US wants. So as of now, as US as a country also has got its own internal politics. Now US is heading to the ever important mid elections. Now these mid elections which are going to happen later this year. Now there Mr. Trump is going to be tested in many of the constituencies. Now, before that, he wants the oil prices to cool down globally. And that is why every couple of weeks you will hear about a ceasefire, the oil prices come down. In the meanwhile, again, the US ensures that there is a fresh wave of attack upon Iran, but the Iranian military still stands resolute. So the US has got a couple of options now. Ensure that there is a kind of uh, an uninitiated end of the war. In that case, there will be a kind of a shameful departure of US from the region. US influence in West Asia will decline, possibly forever. Other than that, you also have the case or the other option where US can ensure that there is a ground invasion. None of the other countries of the region are ready to support the US in terms of ground invasion. So in that case, the US troops have to be put on the ground. And that is where you have the 6 lakh personnel strong Iranian army, which can cause considerable damage to the US. And that is why US is forced to ask itself, why did it enter into this war? And what is the way out? That is something which is not clear. So that is the entire article's gist. I hope you have understood. Now let us understand the point-wise aspect of it so that you have something to extract out of this article as well. First of all, the 4 objectives that US and Israel had in Iran: destroy Iran's nuclear program, eliminate its missile capabilities and military industrial base, weaken or dismantle Iran's regional proxy networks. Iran is a country which is notorious for supporting these proxy networks. Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, right? Now, Houthis are basically endangering the sea traffic from the region of Bab al Mandeb and the Red Sea. Iran is endangering the traffic from the region of the Strait of Hormuz. Recently, you had the sad incident where a projectile actually exploded and sunk an Indian flagged vessel. So the countries across the world, they are basically pondering over it that there is an energy scarcity which is looming in front of them. Then bring about the regime change in Tehran. These were the objectives. Now, you guys are wise enough to take a look at them, to take a look at these and understand which of these objectives have been fulfilled. In fact, in reality, none of them have been. So, basically, what was the grand or what were the grand miscalculations? First grand miscalculation was that Iran is like Venezuela. Okay. That you can simply move in, remove the head of the state. The new head of the state will be ready to sell you oil and will be ready to cooperate with you. For that matter, Ayatollah has been replaced by his elder son, right? And Mushtaba, the person who has his elder son who has replaced him, is considered to be much more hardline as compared to his predecessor. So that is where the regime that US was trying to replace has actually been replaced by a more hardliner regime. And that is where the fundamentalists on the ground, the ideologues on the ground, they have been reinforced. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the IRGC, which is a very strong force in Iran in terms of policy making, in terms of ensuring the reinforcement of the ideology, the IRGC is now being dominated by these particular ideologues. So even the regime has actually resurfaced itself, like what is the famous proverb that you keep on having multiple heads of the snake. Then, other cases, the grand miscalculation is was that aerial attacks will suffice. Okay. The reality of the matter is that in today's day and age, you can see it with the case of Russia Ukraine war. We saw it in the case of even the Armenia Azerbaijan war before that. In multiple different kinetic conflicts which are prevalent across the world, air forces can never be the end solution for any kind of military conquest. For example, take the case of US invasion in Afghanistan. Now, when that did happen, the US Air Force, along with the Tomahawk missiles, managed to completely decapitate the Taliban. But when it actually came to the regime change and enforcing it, that is when US had to put its boots on the ground. And that is when the war became very long drawn. So, this misconception that the Air Force can alone win you the battle, that is something which has been exposed in this particular war. Then, the case of restriction or a restricted scale of conflict. So, this conflict has widened. There is a horizontal expansion of the warfare, right? Then, other than that, US had miscalculated the possibility of the Strait of Hormuz being weaponized. Strait of Hormuz being weaponized. That was another miscalculation on the part of the US. Then, other than that, US had also miscalculated the war fighting appetite of the Gulf nations. War fighting appetite of Gulf nations. Now, out of all the Gulf nations, if you consider, no Gulf nation hates the Iranian regime more than the Saudis. And Saudis were very supportive of the US action against Iran. But what Iran did do as a consequence, attack the various different bases, the oil refineries, etc., that is something that even the Saudis had not calculated. And the Saudis were taken aback. That is why, in the fresh impetus for the new attacks, in many of the cases, it has now become public that the Saudis declined the use of their bases by the US forces in order to mount another wave of attack. So these series of grand miscalculations have ensured that US is now stuck. Now, hereby, when we talk about the case of why this was initiated, it was initiated because of the US action in Venezuela as well as the Iranian action or the revolt on the ground. So, another miscalculation that you can carry out or that you can think about is the case of public opinion. Public opinion, right, in Iran. It has strongly backed the state. And that is something, again, which was a miscalculation. So, what is the way forward? Way forward. Now, when we talk about the peace deal, any kind of a peace deal, now in that peace deal, it is basically going to be a kind of a surrender for the US now, because US has not got anything to show. What will US say? That we have destroyed the Iranian military? But then the Iranian forces still have the missiles, they still have the ability to produce these drones. And they continue to do so in the underground cities that they have. Will they say that we have taken away the enriched uranium? No, Iran is not even ready for providing that. Iran is, in fact, ready to live under sanctions because the economy had been functioning in close collaboration with the Chinese over a long period of time, what is referred to as a closed loop economy. What is that closed loop economy, by the way? So basically, the Chinese got some amount of the defense equipments in return. The Chinese basically provided them with huge amount of grains and other kind of consumer items. So Iran was completely dependent on China. And China has done that in the region. That is what China has done to Pakistan almost. So that is where the peace deal has to be a kind of a complete surrender on either side, which is not acceptable either to the Iranians or the Americans. So peace deal in its entirety is in question. Then, what is the present condition or what is going to be the outcome of this? Outcome. Reduced US influence. This war might very well be remembered a couple of decades later as the war which signified the decline of a superpower. Now, no other country of slightest amount of military heft will ever fear a superpower like US. There are questions being asked that if US is indeed the military superpower that it boasts to have, despite having these endless amount of aircraft carriers, these Zumwalt class destroyers, the stealth frigates, the Strait of Hormuz is something which the US is not able to keep open. The Red Sea is something, and the Bab al Mandeb is something that US is not able to ensure that it is open. Now, this reduced influence, US influence, will be very stark in the region of West Asia. Other than that, you will also have the case of increased role of the Chinese as a hegemon in Asia, hegemon in Asia. Then declined trust or decreased trust in the freedom of navigation, in open and free navigation, because Strait of Hormuz, in all probability, there is going to be a toll tax which is going to be charged. Then, other than that, you will have an emboldened Iran. And when you have an emboldened Iran, that means you will have an emboldened Houthis, emboldened Hezbollah, emboldened Hamas. All of them will be much more powerful. And that is where you will see the unity of the Gulf nations challenged. Each of them are reaching out to Iran to have their own deal rather than relying upon the US. Now, it is in the context of this that we consider another article. That proposed deal will give Iran control over inbound strait traffic. Now, when you consider the region of Strait of Hormuz is a narrow water body. Now, even in that narrow water body, please understand that larger oil containers, or what are referred to as the ultra large carrier containers. Now, these oil containers, they need deeper water to move through, because once loaded, substantial amount of the ship lies underwater. They cannot move through shallow water, because once they move closer to the coastline, let's suppose they get stuck, or let's suppose there is a puncture created due to the shelf area of the ocean, that can lead to oil spill, and that can disrupt the kind of traffic for a long period of time. So way back in around 1968, way back in around 1968, you had the kind of a deal between Oman, Iran, and all the powers and all the countries of the region to assign the two-way traffic system in the region of Gulf of Strait of Hormuz. Now, what is the two-way traffic system? You can see that the ongoing traffic into the Persian Gulf will follow this path, whereas the outgoing traffic will follow this path. That is the true two-way traffic system. Now, this is the region controlled by Oman. This is the geographical region which is referred to as what? Musandam Peninsula. Okay, that is under the control of Oman. So basically, in order to ensure the traffic flow in the region, Oman and Iran are negotiating about the toll charges, the levy charges, which will be charged from all the vessels which are moving through this area. Iran basically is thinking about a high toll charge close to around 5% to 7% of what? Of the value of the cargo which is moving through. Imagine every ship can carry millions of dollars worth of cargo. Now, 5 to 7% per ship, if you observe that, that amount of toll charge will be so very heavy. It will ensure that the prices of crude, the prices of materials in general become very high. And that becomes unaffordable for many countries in the world. So that is going to fuel worldwide inflation, energy scarcity. Poorer nations will have a greater difficulty in meeting those charges. Now, Oman is also discussing a fees around 3%. Okay. So this is basically a violation of the earlier treaty, which was done in 1968 with the countries of the region. International Maritime Organization was the agency at the helm of this particular treaty. And eventually, that treaty is being put to the dustbin. But understand here, on top of this Iranian tantrum, you have the ever imposing personality of Mr. Trump himself. Now, and this is where it gets very interesting. Right now, Iran will ensure that whether the traffic can move through or not, everything is under the control of Iran. But then Mr. Trump is saying that we are closing the strait or we are ensuring that the strait is open. Anybody who pays any toll to, let's suppose, the Iranians, we will impose sanctions on them also. So, it is, if I have to provide an analogy, imagine that there is a robber in your house. Okay. Now you are thinking that how to keep my materials safe inside the house. If I go inside, I can be hurt by the robber. Meanwhile, some other uncle from other society comes around and says that, by the way, if you go through and if you pay anything to the robber, maybe I will kill you. So that is where the rest of the countries, all that they can do is wait for the situation to be sorted. Otherwise, there is no end to this kind of topsy turvy game about who controls the strait. That is never going to be clear in the near time future. So, what are the compliance issues? So, US has imposed sanctions on the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Now, what is that? Persian Gulf Strait Authority. This is an authority which has been created by the Iranians. Now, Iran has created this authority in order to charge levy from the traffic. Iran is saying that, look, it is not a toll tax. It is simply a money that I am taking for the environmental concerns. An oil extracting country suddenly becomes concerned about the environment. You have to ask yourself whether you are dreaming or whether there is a larger scam going on. So Iran is basically saying that we have created this Persian Gulf Strait Authority to charge levy in the name of environmental safeguard and environmental concerns. And that is where US is saying any person X or any country XYZ who is paying any amount of dollars to the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, this country will face sanctions. From whom? From US. Okay. Now, for any kind of sea traffic, let's suppose you are transporting a set of cars or even potatoes from point A to point B. There is a lot of risk. Maybe you have the containers upturned in adverse weather condition. There is theft by the pirates, etc. So the merchant ships, they get an insurance done. Okay, they get an insurance done, and the transporters, they pay for that insurance. Now, due to the US pressure which was imposed and which has been imposed across the world, US Treasury has imposed the threat of the sanctions, other pressures also. Now, you had the case of Lloyd's Market Association, right? Lloyd's Market Association has said that if any ship pays a transit fee to the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, their insurance will be cancelled. So imagine now, if you are operating a vessel which has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, you have to think about the Iranian regime. They can attack your vessel. If not, the US might come at any point of time. They can attack your vessel. If, let's suppose, you pay the Iranians that let me go, then the US will impose sanctions on you. If, let's suppose, you somehow circumvent that sanctions, then your insurance cover will be cancelled and US will attack your vessel. So, in a way, what US has achieved after this war is a complete militarization of one of the busiest trade routes across the world. What was referred to as a choke point by geostrategists for a long period of time has actually been choked now in front of our very own eyes. And that is the result of carrying out a war far away from your shores, having a kind of an ambitious goal without wargaming. And now, if the news reports are correct, Pete Hegseth, one of the most chauvinist Secretary of War that US ever had. Now he's facing the brunt of Mr. Trump, where Mr. Trump has blasted him that why didn't you have enough ammunitions and enough war reserves to carry this war forever? So this is a developing story where it gets interesting by the day. But then, for a country like India, which is energy scarce, this is also scary in terms of the oil prices, and that can always influence the commodity prices going ahead into the future. Now, as a country where we have started attracting in this month of August some amount of FII inflow, that can be dangerous, that can be risky for the economy and the economic growth as well. Okay. Now, Handloom, Weaving India's Heritage into Global Growth is an article written by the Union Minister for Textiles. Now, this is basically on the eve of the Handloom Day, which is celebrated on 7th of August. Why is the Handloom Day celebrated only on 7th of August? What is the reason for that? So basically, very good. It is celebrated in order to remember the Swadeshi movement, to commemorate the Swadeshi movement. Okay. Now, let me give you the gist of the article first. What is this article about? The article talks about the role of handloom, how it is a labor intensive industry employing a greater proportion, around two-thirds of the women folk in this. It has got a greater involvement of the members of the depressed classes or the members of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes as well. As a consequence, it can be all encompassing and it can bring about an upliftment. Okay. Now, if the handloom sector does well, then it can mean that larger populations' overall income level will increase. Along with that, there can be the probability that basically, when it comes to the case of uh, even our global exports, that will improve. Because India as a country had always been known for its handloom textiles, right? The fine muslins crafted in eastern part of the country from Bengal. Now they were famed across the world that a very large piece of muslin could be passed through a smaller ring itself. So that is why India's handloom exports were always very prominent. In fact, the Romans have recorded the kind of affinity that the royalty of Rome had and the Roman civilization had for Indian handlooms. So, from the days of the glory, this was something which was pauperized or impoverished during the British era. British, very famously, they broke the thumbs of the Indian textile workers and the handloom workers. And since that point of time, the impoverization has actually continued. Now, the government has been carrying out certain measures over the decades. But now, in recent times, what has been the measure to improve the handloom sector is relevant for your exam, both for the prelims as well as the mains. So, National Handloom Day, celebrated on 7th of August. It basically commemorates the launch of Swadeshi movement, right? Why? Why only this movement? Because it promoted indigenous goods and encouraged self reliance. It celebrated India's weaving traditions and socio-economic and cultural contribution of the handloom workers in the larger cause of nation building was also recognized by this. Now, what is the population of handloom workers in our country? Now, that is something which is measured, that is not mentioned in the article. So, what is the population of the handloom workers in the country? So, that is basically counted with the help of the handloom census. Okay. Till now, India has conducted four handloom census exercises: 1987-88, 95-96, 2009 2010, and 2019-2020. So, we have around 31.45 lakh handloom households. Okay. Now, here basically you have the weavers, allied workers across the country. 8.4548 lakh were allied workers, pre loom, post loom processing activities like dyeing, washing, etc. Now, the workers enumerated to the census, they have been provided with a Pehchan or e-Pehchan cards. And a portal, e-Pehchan portal, has been launched in the month of January. All these are relevant for your prelims examination. Okay, please get that in mind. It is so the National Handloom Day. From that, you can have these kind of questions which can be asked. What is the e-Pehchan portal associated with which of the following sectors? So there you have to be sharp enough. Okay. Now, around 84,000 additional workers have been approved of the e-Pehchan cards as of now. Now, what is the national initiative when it comes to the handloom? So, one is the National Handloom Development Program. Okay, this is the ever encompassing National Handloom Initiative. This was initiated in the year 2021-22 to around 2025-26. That was the initial plan of this National Handloom Development Program. It includes a series of measures to support and improve the handloom sector. First is small cluster development. What is this small cluster development? Under this, special incentive has been provided. Certain clusters of handloom workers and handloom development has been identified. There has been a kind of dedicated amount of money which has been given. For what? Why will you give money to these clusters? For what purpose? So, for example, let's suppose development of work sheds. Now, you see, many of the handloom workers in the country, they work in extremely poor conditions. Simple aspects such as a work shed can improve their productivity. They can save them from the harsh climate on the outside. So, those work sheds. Then you also have the case of the electronic working machines, etc., which can also increase their productivity. So, all these, there has been a special incentive provided, handloom marketing assistance through a platform to allow them to market their products, right? Weaver Mudra scheme, financial assistance, special infrastructure projects, providing them the basic infrastructure supply, cluster development and cluster, small cluster and large cluster. Both are different, and providing schemes for the welfare of the weavers. These are the parts of National Handloom Development Program. Having said that, for your exam, you need to know the details of this also. Which details am I talking about? So here, small cluster development program. So handloom clusters with a funding of up to rupees 2 crore. This is not given in the article, by the way. This is from the PIB backgrounder. Okay. But important for the same topic. Funding up to rupees 2 crore to identify specific development needs, better looms, lighting facilities, work sheds, design, product development, etc. Now, here 357 clusters were sanctioned in the period of 21-22 to 25-26 till the month of June. So, for example, construction of a simple work shed, right? 100% subsidy is provided by the government for this. Now, as a consequence of that, look at the outcomes of this. Average daily production increased by 53%. Okay. Average working hours rose by 60%. Monthly working days increased by 28%. Average daily earnings increased by 42%. So that is what a simple workshed can do. Then you also have the case of electronic jacquard, okay, which helps in weaving and reduces the manual labor. So it manipulates individual warp threads, enabling faster and more intricate weaving. So average daily production increased thereby as well, and average daily wages rose by around 56%. So that is where you can see that this is all included in the part of the small cluster development program. What are the subparts of small cluster development program? A kind of incentive or a kind of a subsidy provided for improved working conditions, improved product design, better the case of product development, better marketing. For that, the money which is provided is the small cluster development program. Now, handloom marketing assistance. So, a platform for the handloom organizations and the weavers to sell their products to the consumers directly. You have the case of urban hearts and marketing initiatives. Okay, various events, around 960 plus events have been organized at the national, state, and the district levels to allow for the weavers and the larger organizations to sell their products. Along with that, for better recognition, awards have also been constituted, right? So, for example, you have the Sant Kabir Handloom Award. Okay. So, handloom weavers with exceptional skills and contributions in weaving traditions, continuing the lost tradition, rare tradition of weaving. Now, they are given the award, which carries a sum total of 3.5 lakh, a mounted gold coin, shawl, certificate. And then, along with that, you have the National Handloom Award for craftsmanship, innovation, carrying a price total of 2 lakh rupees. Again, both of these are going to be relevant for your prelims. Okay, I hope you are noting this down, or even in the annotations of the PDF. Don't note this down. You will get the annotations of the PDF. You revise it from there itself. Okay, now it is here that new age marketing and new age markets being devised by the government can also help. So, for example, digital platforms like Vision Next. Now, what is the role of Vision Next? It will inculcate or integrate AI into providing this market platform, which can forecast the future demand, right? And as a consequence of that, the weavers can also change their design or weave accordingly. Whatever is the market demand, eventually you have to fulfill that. identify the design trends being popular across the world, authenticate genuine handloom products. That will remove the counterfeits. Connect artisans directly with international buyers. That is where the big bucks and the big money lies, and improve branding and also the market access. What is the problem that the small town weavers face? For example, let's assume that you have a weaver in a region like Rishra in West Bengal. Now, what they are weaving, if that is required in a country like Netherlands or Germany, if that is in great demand, will that weaver ever get access to them? No. So that is where you need to provide these kind of platforms where these simple weavers from Meghalaya, from Assam, from Bengal, from Bihar, from UP, all of them can market their products, earn a good living. The minister in the article says that eventually the aim is that each of the weaver should be able to earn rupees 50,000 a month. But that is where a lot of work needs to be done. Other such initiatives, concessional credit or the Weaver Mudra scheme. There is a separate Weaver Mudra scheme. So, a concessional 6% interest rate for 3 years for handloom sector loans, right? And this is further supported by the government by the interest subvention of up to 7%, right? Now, here, the handloom weavers welfare social security. So that is when you have where you have the Pradhan Mantri Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana, life insurance, renewable life insurance to handloom weavers and workers in the age group of 18 to 50 years, benefit of 2 lakh in the event of death due to any cause. Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana, annual accidental coverage, insurance to handloom weavers to the age group of 18 to 70 years in 2016 and 2017 prelims, by the way. One of the most prominent trends of questions that UPSC started asking is the age group in terms of the government scheme beneficiaries. So be very clear that you know or you revise which is the age group that a particular scheme is benefiting. So Suraksha Bima Yojana 18 to 70, Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana 18 to 50. Okay. Now, here, other than that, you also have mega cluster development program, central assistance of up to 30 crores over 5 years, right? Each mega handloom cluster covers at least 10,000 handlooms or clusters. For example, you have regions like Varanasi, etc. There you will have larger sections, very large number of handloom weavers in a smaller area. So there you can have a grant of up to around 30 crore over 5 years. 8 mega clusters are completed, 4 are under implementation. And then you have need based special infra projects. So for development, quality improvement, productivity, 6 craft handloom villages are operational and under implementation. This is the portion of the National Handloom Development Program. Okay. But it is also important for the handloom sector to ensure authenticity in the era where the kind of first copies become a norm. The handloom weavers oftentimes suffer. So that is why, in order to ensure authenticity, handloom mark is generated. The India handloom brand, which promotes niche, high quality, environmentally responsible products, GI registrations, these are ensured in order to provide a kind of authenticity to the products as well. Along with that, there is an institutional support as well, which is provided. You have 29 Weaver service centers for design support, skill upgradation, raw material assistance, and 11 Indian Institutes of Handloom Technology are also being strengthened. Innovation is the key in order to make the handloom relevant even in the modern era. And that is where you have Handloom 4.0 initiative, which builds upon the innovation. For example, Mahatma Gandhi's Amber Charkha improved the efficiency of spinning. Late in the recent times, you have Assam's Maina Loom and Chitranjan Handloom that have also improved the efficiency of the handloom weaving. So, Handloom 4.0 initiative includes the artificial intelligence, digital monitoring, productivity tracking, the quality control, and so on. That is implemented on a pilot basis as of now on 100 looms, will be expanded later to almost all the states. Let us take a look at the practice question. Why is the handloom sector relevant in the changing world? Discuss the measures taken to ensure the growth in the sector. What do you write in the intro for such kind of an answer? In the intro, you will write about the role of handloom as a labor intensive sector. Labor intensive. Okay. Then you talk about the women employment. Almost 72% of the employees are women. Labor intensive, here, talk about the 34 lakh households. You talk about the coverage across various caste groups, etc. Then in the body, very important to ensure the relevance in the present day world for the growth of this population and the sector. And that is where you basically have to start talking about the government initiatives, right? Government initiatives. Okay. Write the answer for this. And in the government initiative, start with the National Handloom Development Program and then the subparts that we have mentioned in the article. Next article, Access Paradox. Access Paradox is about the private medical education increasing its foothold amongst the medical seats in our country. So, just to give you a broader idea, now you see, this is the case of the medical colleges in our country, right? Medical colleges in our country were 314 in 2010, have increased to 823 in 2026. The blue mark that you see is the government medical colleges. Okay. The yellow mark that you see is the case of the private medical colleges. So the number of medical colleges and the medical seats in our country has started ballooning, has started increasing rapidly. Now, while this is happening, there is a concern. For example, in 2026, the number of new medical seats added had a 79% proportionality of the private sector. Okay. So India has nearly tripled its MBBS seats over the past 12 years itself through government initiatives. Now, most of the recent increase, that is this year for the first time, private institutions account for more than half of the MBBS seats. What does that mean? That raises a lot of issues. One issue is that of affordability. For example, in a government medical seat, you will be charged somewhere around rupees 5 lakhs. Okay. Now, in the case of a private medical seat, this can jump 10 times to 20 times, right? So the affordability is not there for the larger public. So the larger population has to rely on the government seats. Now, the private seats, they still charge what is referred to as the capitation fee, right, or donation. Despite the strict government norms, guidelines, etc., still the under the table exchanges, they keep on happening. Now, there is also a regional concentration. What do we mean by regional concentration? When we talk about the private colleges, do you think these private colleges will be established in the suburban part of the country or rural part of the countryside? No, because there the capacity to pay for the seat will be very less. Where is it that people will have the capacity to pay 50 lakh or 1 crore for the private education? It will be largely in concentrated in tier 1 and tier 2 cities, right, of the country. That is where all these colleges will be restricted. Now, people coming out of these colleges, will they go out to serve in the rural areas? No. So that is where access to healthcare is also going to be completely marginalized, right? There is going to be a kind of a regionalization in this, concentrated in the urban areas. Rural areas, the access to good healthcare won't be there. Now, with the ballooning of huge number of these colleges, there is also a concern about the quality. What is the quality of the professors, the doctors that you have, the training that people get? So, regulation is very, very important. So, what is the way forward in this particular case? What is the way forward that one can take a look into? One is ensure that there are strict regulations in terms of capitation fee, donations, or capitation fee, as it is referred to. Okay. Then there are a kind of regulated checks, inspections done for the quality assurance, quality control. Then there needs to be a kind of a special incentive or credit provided to the doctors coming out of it to serve in the rural areas. So incentivizing service in rural areas. Okay, this has to be ensured. And also, while you cannot cap the fees that the private colleges are charging, if they are charging something, you have to ensure that people have the access to the finance if possible, or also in a particular region there is not an overt concentration, so that you should not have bogus seats being created by the private colleges being filled up just like that. Okay, so this is something which is a way forward which has to be ensured. At the end of the day, you also have large number of government seats being created, but there the number has to increase. Now, the Beijing model of innovation over a period of time, through the various discussions and the news stories that you would have followed, you would have observed that in any kind of technology, from stealth to radar tech to AI, everywhere, China is leapfrogging the entirety of the world. China has come to the front of the world when it comes to innovation. The number of patents being filed from China have always been very high for almost the past couple of decades. But translating that into industry friendly and industry relevant products is the real achievement of China. We also file multiple number of patents from the various universities that we have, but not every time are we able to churn out a kind of a result out of that. China is able to churn out a result. Now, why is that? So that is because of creation of a very virtuous cycle of industry academia connect, along with that ensuring that the state steps in wherever funding is required. For example, there is a risky innovation, for example. Now, venture capitalists who fund the startups, let's suppose they are slightly hesitant to provide the money. That is where the state steps in. State will have some ownership of the company. It will provide you the funds. If your company grows, the state will benefit out of that as well. So that has allowed multiple students, graduates in these universities to come at the forefront of the research and development parameter. Okay, so for example, the article talks about the case of the moonshot, the Kimi 3 AI model, which was generated by the undergrads, right? So you have the Peking University, the Tsinghua University, they are at the forefront of innovation. So, unlike the conventional model, where innovation is driven primarily and mainly by the private enterprise, here it is also the role of the state supported collaborative ecosystem. It is the ecosystem which brings together the universities, the startups, the industries, and then, along with that, the government funding. The prime objective is to bridge valley of death. What is this valley of death, by the way? What do we refer to as the valley of death? For example, let's suppose you are in a college, right? You are in a university. You come up with a kind of an innovation, but that innovation, in order to transform into a kind of a tangible product, there is a long distance to be covered, right? Let's suppose I have come up with an innovation of wireless charging, but to make a product out of it, more research needs to be carried out, scaling up needs to be done, and then a venture can be made. Many of the innovations, they get lost in the midway. That is known as the valley of death of the innovation. So valley of death basically is, when we talk about valley of death, in the case of the innovation sector, that is the case of idea to implementation, product implementation, right? Imagine this being the kind of valley that has to be covered. So what is done in this particular case, where when we talk about China? So whenever you have the case of any particular individual coming up with an idea, right? So an idea is brought by the students, okay? Now the universities, they step in and they allow the idea to grow. They provide the incubation. Universities provide incubation. Okay. This incubation basically allows for growth of startups and companies. Now these companies want more innovation. Okay. Because they have grown as a consequence of innovation. And that is where they go back to the students for more ideas. So they put more money in the universities. So universities also grow, the startups also grow. Now, wherever the funding gap is present, that is where the state pitches in with some amount of funding. So basically, the industry to institution connect is very strong. Industry, what it does, it poses question, a larger question. For example, how can we have a large scale wireless charging? And who answers them? Institutions, academia. This industry to institution connect is lacking in our country. Okay. Various different states, various different municipalities, they are competing in China with each other to provide funding. Now, this has led to a kind of a challenge as well. The challenge has been what? The challenge posed is quite unique. So you have the various provinces individually funding these ideas. Okay. Now they fund multiple ideas. They will fund at one go. Let's suppose they are funding 100 ideas. The aim is one of these ideas will make it big. And that is where we will earn all our return and we will do good as a consequence of that. Now there is a race for funding by each of these provinces. As a consequence of that, there is an increased case of bad investments. Because how many provincial government do you think will have the intellectual wherewithal in order to have the due process carried out, that which is a good idea, which is a scalable idea or not? So this bad investment has basically led to a kind of a financial crisis of the states, debt crisis of the states. Okay. And that is something where the regulators have now stepped in, because there is a real estate problem that the states are also facing. There has been a real estate decline. Along with that, these bad investments which are turning out. So that is why the regulators have stepped in, that carry out due diligence. Only then should you provide a kind of a funding. Now, when we discuss this article, What do you extract out of this article, or do you simply listen to this article and ignore? No. Oftentimes you come across the news stories, or you come across the questions, how to improve R&D ecosystem, research and development ecosystem in our country, what to do to ensure to improve the education system in our country, what to do in order to improve the income levels and innovation in ecosystem in the country. In the way forward, these are the ideas. This is the virtuous loop that you can talk about. Okay, you can talk about the benefit that these particular regions they gain out of it. You can talk about that how in India this valley of death is very very large. You have the patents being filed by the people in IITs or the NITs or the leading institutions, research institutions, but they never materialize. So as a consequence, if that never materializes, if let's suppose I have published a research paper, it has amounted to nothing, then in the future, as a junior, would I be encouraged to produce more research papers? No. So there has to be an incentive. How do you provide the incentive? The person who has carried out the research, allow them to become big. And that is where this valley of death has to be bridged. And this is where the Chinese model is helpful. The state carries the risk, part ownership, and ensures that overall these ideas they get an incubation center. Okay. Why are households pledging gold instead of selling it? Now, India has been a very large consumer of gold. Gold jewelry has been one of those favorite possessions in almost all of the Indian households that you will observe. However, in recent times, the uptake of the gold jewelry has been less in our country. The gold usage has been robust, however, which means what? That more people are investing in gold coins, gold bars, etc., rather than jewelry. So that is the changing consumer behavior in our country. Okay. So overall gold demand in India has increased by 2% year on year. So it has increased to 282 tons in the first half of the year. But this was driven by investment demand rather than jewelry purchase. In fact, the jewelry purchase fell by 17.1%. Right. It is one of the weakest first half performances in the as per the World Global Council, who has been maintaining the record since 2000. Now, the investor behavior is changing. The younger people, the younger population, they are not buying jewelry in large numbers. They are investing in ETF, exchange traded funds, the gold bars, coins. And that is why the demand for the physical gold is high, but the jewelry demand has gone down. Why is that? There is an increased investment and continued investment in this gold bars, etc.? Because gold is inflation proof. Its value has kept on increasing. Now, the article has indicated, for example, if you would have bought a gold jewelry worth 10 grams or in 28,000 rupees around 2016, in 10 years, that amount would have been around 1.5, 1.6 lakh. So, gold is a kind of inflation proof, right? And the value will keep on increasing. RBI has increased its overall purchase of the gold. So, why? Not only RBI, across the world, many central banks have increased the outtake of the gold. The reason being there is an increased volatility in the currency. Global markets are volatile. All the central banks want to cement their foreign exchange reserves, and that is why they have been buying gold in large numbers. But this is not the problem. The problem is that in India, the gold loans are increasing. Meaning what? That number of people who are pledging gold and taking loans as a consequence of that, that is increasing, right? So that has basically driven the attention of the regulators that whether it is leading to a kind of a bad practice or not. Household gold any day in India is one of the largest positions anywhere across the world. That is where in 2015, the government had come up with the gold monetization scheme. What was the gold monetization scheme? That let's suppose I have gold at 10 grams gold at my disposal in my home. I put it in the bank. I will continue to earn interest out of it. But then taxation aspect, inflation aspect, everything that was dicey, it was removed. It was not a success. People were not ready to participate in that. People are not ready to put their gold just for the sake of earning interest. The idea is I will earn more without the interest. So that is where gold loans, this is where there is a risk of over leverage. Okay. And that is where the RBI is also monitoring it with the banks. It can worsen the condition of the banks as well. How? Let's suppose I have taken a 5 lakh rupees loan and kept some gold. Now, that gold's value will also increase over a period of time during the loan tenure. As a consumer, I can be very picky and sticky about it. So, this is a point of concern where the household gold is being used for increased indebtedness. And that is where the personal loans associated with gold mortgage is a risk in terms of consumer behavior. So, in a nutshell, what is this article talking about? Overall demand for gold is increasing, but the jewelry demand is decreasing. So, where is the demand going? Demand is going as investors in exchange traded funds, in the case of gold bars, gold coins, etc. Why? Because that is inflation proof, that value has been increasing continuously. As a consequence of that, you have the case of where multiple people are putting money rather than jewelry into this solid gold. Gold monetization scheme did not work. But then the concern out of this is the mortgage associated with gold products. Couple of articles relevant for your prelims. Government okays rupees 23,000 crore GOBARdhan scheme outtake. Now, what is the GOBARdhan scheme? GOBARdhan scheme is basically a comprehensive scheme to promote the circular economy by turning the organic waste like dung, like kitchen waste, like, for example, the sugarcane processing waste, all of them, and generate biogas as a consequence of it. To promote circular bioeconomy, ensure converting of organic waste, so waste handling will also be taken care of, manure can be manufactured, reduce dependence on fossil fuel, provide clean cooking fuel and clean energy to the larger population. Now, under this, biogas plants, individual and community biogas plants will be set up. Compressed biogas plants, there will be support subsidy provided to set up those. Distribution system, that is what this 23,000 crore outlay is about, to ensure assured outtake and setting up the distribution centers in various different regions, creation of a kind of a manure that will ensure a kind of an income generation, cleaner environment, cleaner energy, sanitation, right? Waste management in rural areas, sustainable agriculture. What will be the feedstock used to generate this biogas? Municipal solid waste, cattle dung, agricultural waste, and so on. This is being implemented, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. So it will be used basically for assured offtake, capital subsidies, boosting pipeline infrastructure, the city gas distribution, easier access to finance for setting up these larger the biogas plants. Okay. Now, Coal India forays into iron ore mining. Now, this is where you have Coal India Limited, which is responsible for over 80% of the local output of the dry fossil fuel that we have. It has basically been the preferred bidder for Gadadharpur iron ore block in Odisha. Okay. This is the first time that Coal India will venture into iron ore mining. Now, this is important for Coal India as well because coal is not something that it will mine continuously for the coming decades. The world is transitioning away from coal, right? So, this is where the government has also declared its overall intention to become self-sufficient when it comes to critical minerals, rare earth elements, and the overall mining sector. So this is where this diversification of Coal India will allow some mining expertise to be leveraged in other areas as well. It also converges with the government's plan to increase the steel output. For that, more mining is required, and that is where Coal India will come into play. And overall, the steel infrastructure, any kind of infrastructure development in the country, will require huge amount of steel. So that is why iron ore mining is important. Which area? Gadadharpur block in Odisha. Now, few articles relevant for your from your PIB. So India concluded the 10th BRICS Industry Minister meeting. Now here, enhanced cooperation on MSMEs, photovoltaics, startups, and logistics was arrived at. So it is India's chairship in 2026. This is when Xi Jinping is also expected to travel to India in the later part of the year. And here, BRICS partnership on new industrial revolution, part NIR, part NIR, was something which was discussed about. Okay, this is where the Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal basically talked about the importance of having a smoother transition for the MSMEs into cutting edge technology. So it all started, the BRICS summit started from the summit in Yekaterinburg in Russia in 2009. Now, under the chairship of India, previously you had the chairship. Now this was given to India in 2026. Previously it was under Brazil in 2025. So under the chairship of India, when it comes to industries, four priority sectors have been identified: finalization of the framework of cooperation for the SMEs working group, adoption of terms of reference and action plan for the working group on photovoltaic, for solar panels, cleaner energy, action plan on innovation led group for startups, resilient industry related transport and logistics systems, including GIS based city planning, city logistics, etc. These are the 4 points which India has initiated during its chairship. Okay, so this is basically, it was held in Jaipur, and these were the outcomes. Now, Agni IV ballistic missile has been successfully tested. Agni IV is a nuclear capable ballistic missile that India has with a very great amount of precision. The precision is almost to the range of 10 meters. When you think about a missile which can have a range of almost 4,000 kilometers, the precision of 10 meters is immense. Now, it can have a payload capacity of up to 1,000 kg. It can carry nuclear warheads as well. This test, however, was carried by the Strategic Forces Command. India's nuclear arsenal is under the control of a separate command that is known as the Strategic Forces Command. So, this is a separate entity which has been created post the Kargil War. Post the Kargil War, when it was realized that nuclear weapon arsenal needs to be handled differently, so it was established on 4th of January 2003. It was based on the recommendations of the Kargil War Review Committee of the group of ministers. It functions under India's Nuclear Command Authority. What are its key responsibilities? Operational deployment of nuclear weapons, custody and management of nuclear delivery systems, planning the nuclear missions, right? So, Nuclear Command Authority, by the way, it has two heads. One is the Prime Minister, the Political Council, other Executive Council chaired by the National Security Advisor, and both of them, they will give the direction to the Strategic Forces Command. Now, this Strategic Forces Command will be headed by a commander in chief, which is normally a three-star officer, a general. Now, the Tri Service Command with personnel from Army, Navy, and Air Force, because after all, we have a nuclear triad. That is, nuclear weapons can be delivered from land based missile, from submarines, as well as from aircraft. So land-based missiles from Prithvi to Agni, Agni 2, Agni 3, 4, 5, all of them are under the control of Strategic Forces Command. Sea-based K-15, K-4, they are under the case of Strategic Forces Command. That is the role of the SFC, and that it is the Strategic Forces Command which will decide upon India's nuclear doctrine. As of now, we have the no first use nuclear doctrine, that we will not initiate the attack in case of nuclear weapons. Okay. Then MAHA water mission. Now, Anusandhan National Research Foundation, which is a statutory body under the government of India to improve the research ecosystem as per the national education policy. Now, they have basically started the MAHA program, Mission for Advancement in High Impact Areas. And it is to support priority centric solution based research in areas for nation building. Now, MAHA Water Program was launched by the ANRF. Now, what is it? It is basically water resource assessment and sustainable management, drinking water, water quality, the health associated with the clean water access, then water use efficiency and recycling and the circular economy, and climate resilience and adaptation. So, those are basically the parts of the MAHA water program. So, understand this. You have the research foundation, Anusandhan National Research Foundation. It will ensure research in various different areas. Under that, it has set up a MAHA program, that is Mission for Advancement in High Impact Areas. This MAHA program has got a subpart, that is the water mission. The aim to improve the water quality, availability, efficiency, circular use, affordability, and so on. Okay, that brings us to the end of the discussion. The discussion has been detailed. I hope the discussion has been helpful in helping you understand the aspects of today's newspaper. If you have liked the session, put that in the comment section, and don't forget to click on the like, share, and the subscribe button. We meet again tomorrow. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you.